I'm always at fair. You know, one time at
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Milan Simard, and I'm the events facilitator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, and that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene people. In addition, McNally Robinson rests itself here on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Brewstertown. We are gathered here today to celebrate the launch of the latest book from Patti Grayson, The Twistical Nature of Spoons. I'd like to thank Turnstone Press for publishing this book and for all their assistance in making this happen tonight. Just a few procedural notes before we get started. Patti will read a selection from her book before joining host Sarah Ens here in conversation. Following that conversation, there'll be an opportunity to ask questions. If you have a question, raise your hand and I will join you with the microphone. That is just so that the people watching at home online can hear your questions clearly. And I will be back at the close of the event to review the signing procedure. But I will just mention that we ask that you stay in your seats right after so that we can usher Patti over to the signing table, and then we'll let you know when you're free to go and get your book signed. So this evening, your host is Sarah Ens, a writer and editor based in Treaty 1 territory here in Winnipeg. Her poetry and nonfiction have appeared in numerous publications throughout North America. Sarah holds a BFA in writing from the University of Saskatchewan, from the University of British Columbia, and an MFA, these people with multiple degrees, an MFA in writing from the University of Saskatchewan. Her debut collection of poetry, The World is Mostly Sky, was shortlisted for the 2021 McNally Robinson Book of the Year Award and the 2022 Lansdowne Prize for Poetry. Flyway, her second book of poetry, was shortlisted for the 2023 McNally Robinson Book of the Year Award, a 2023 Margaret Williams Award, and recently received the 2023 Relit Award in the category of poetry. Here to introduce Patti Grayson, please join me in welcoming Sarah Ens.
Thanks so much. It's really wonderful to see you all here. Patti Grayson is a novelist, short story writer, and YA author. Her books have been nominated for numerous awards, including the McNally Robinson Books for Young People Award, the Margaret Lawrence Award for Fiction, and the Relit Award. Reviewers have called her a master at keeping 3 balls in the air at once, juggling her characters as they bounce off each other time and again, and also as an author of great talent. Both of these pronouncements are on full display in her newest novel, which we have the privilege of celebrating here tonight, The Twistical Nature of Spoons. Patti grew up in Northwestern Ontario and has been writing fiction since the age of 8. She moved to Winnipeg, studied English and theater at university, got married, became a mother, raised her children, and has worked as an actor, a puppeteer, and a librarian. I collaborated with Patti on The Twistical Nature of Spoons as her editor, and I feel very lucky to not only have had the opportunity to delve so deeply into this magical, heartwarming book, but also to have been able to get to know Patti a little bit, as besides being an excellent writer, she is also very funny and insightful. It is my very great honor to invite Patti up now to read from The Twistical Nature of Spoons.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Before I begin, I really want to take a moment to congratulate Sarah in this place before receiving the Relit Award for Poetry for her absolutely remarkable book, Flyway. And I can honestly tell you that if I had won the Relit Award last Friday, my head would be so swelled, it would not be fitting in this room. So I am doubly grateful to Sarah. Not only did she wear the editor's hat perfectly with helping me get the Twistical Nature of Spoons into shape, but she's also wearing her host hat tonight, and it's fitting. Her head is not swelled, and it's just so lovely. I'm so grateful, and I'd like you all to help me congratulate Sarah tonight as well. Thank you, everyone, and thank you all for being here tonight. I can't tell you how wonderful it is to look out and see friends and family, and it's just magical. The solitary life of a writer gets rewarded infrequently, and it's when you are joined by family and friends on a night like tonight that it makes all that toil worth it. So thank you all for being here. For those tuning in from afar, welcome and hi, Boston. Thanks also to Milen and John and McNally Robinson Booksellers. This is such an incredible place to launch a book. I've launched all 4 of my books here. It is such a wonderful staff and store in terms of understanding this process and making this room possible for us. So thank you very much. A salute to my Literary Guild cohort here. That's my writers group, and we've been sharing our work for years, and it really makes that solitary journey a little easier as well. Thanks to my family, my children and their partners, my son and my daughter. They not only support me, they indulge me, which is I consider myself blessed for having all 4 of them in my life. And to my husband, who he retired from his own career at about the time this book really got underway, and he was subjected to about like daily doses of rewriting of a paragraph 20 times and having to listen to me read it aloud to him. And he subsequently joined a rock band as a result. So my sincerest gratitude also goes to Turnstone Press. What can I say? It's been such a journey. 3 of my 4 books have been published with the gang, and thanks to Melissa Morrow, who saw this manuscript in very early stages and managed to stick with it. She copy edited and proofed it for me. She's meticulous as well as insightful. So thank you, Melissa. To Sharon and Jameis, I say thank you not only for, I think I'm holding up McNally's copy, not mine, but thank you for this beautiful object that I get to hold in my hands tonight. And thank you for years of support and friendship. Thank you. Thank you to all of you. That's it. Oh, sorry, camera. Oh man, okay. I'm going to, oh, there's my book. I'm going to read now from The Twistical Nature of Spoons. It is a book told in 2 voices. Each of the chapters is divided into 1/2 for Blisse, who's the daughter, and 1/2 for Ina, who's the mother. And the book opens when Blisse is an 18-year-old, but it goes back in time to when she's about 6. And so I'm going to actually read to you from a point where she's younger in the book rather than start from the beginning, but I am going to read Ina's opening chapter. So without further ado, you'll get a taste of each of the characters with this. I'm going to take a sip of water. I'm also going to read from sheets because vision glasses, you know. The first chapter for Ina is called Ina Encounters. "19 years ago, a man walked into a bar. If you're waiting for the corny punchline, better brace yourself. This is more on the scale of a cosmic joke. Cue the drum sting anyway, but although it's almost 2 decades back, it's not as hard to remember what happened as it is to remember why. Like, who was I back then, and why was I so stupid? You can't just sidle up to a library shelf and expect to find the answers to those kinds of questions. Blisse probably told you, I'm going to spin a yarn, try to pull the wool over your eyes. But I've been laddering down on my mistakes, and I don't intend to repeat them. What I'm about to tell you is the honest to God's truth. It was an unseasonably warm early spring evening in the late 1970s, and a man walked into the Three Sheets Tavern where I worked. I glanced up when the glass chime tinkled at the door, but my eyes shifted back to the bar's front window, out to the lights of the Lakehead Harbor beyond. The port had started hopping again. First the icebreakers, then the freighters making their way in and out, headed through the Great Lakes and down the St. Lawrence. The man who walked in regained my full attention when he stalled in the entrance, as if making up his mind about the place. He turned as if to leave. At that point, I pegged him for a crewman or a stevedore, sculpted cheekbones, 5 o'clock shadow, dark hair that hung past his earlobes and fractured at his collar, unkempt. But not cheap campfire, wieners on a stick unkempt. Think sizzling appetizers topped haphazardly on a platter. He glanced around both halves of the bar before dodging away from the midweek pool tournament on the one side, beelining for the table set closest to the back on the other, the one next to the men's room. None of our regulars sat there unless it was the last table in the place. You could smell the disinfectant pucks in the urinals from that table, a gross addition to the 2-for-1 combo of stale beer and cigarette smoke. Not that I smelled rosy myself after struggling to haul down the oversized playoffs banner for my boss Antony's defeated Maple Leafs on an unexpectedly balmy day. It was a time of year when warm temperatures trick you into believing you've seen the last snowfall, but the furnace won't knock it off because it can't believe its own thermostat. I would have appreciated the man who walked into a bar taking a vacant stool up front, saving me the extra steps to serve him as poison. But I forced a smile as I approached the back table because Antony insisted that the Three Sheets creed was to try and show even the unruliest drunk some courtesy. If a guy can leave with some dignity, he won't be cursing my place with the evil eye or nothing. Antony's superstitious nature could only be matched by my mother's. And since she had good reason for her beliefs, with my father's life ending under a construction ladder when I was still in diapers, I figured I shouldn't question Antony's precautionary wisdom either. So I concentrated on relaxing my scrunched up nose as I crossed the bar and beamed as if I hadn't a care in the world. I placed a cardboard coaster down in front of the man, courtesy of Molson Export Ale. I liked working in an establishment that provided coasters, and these with their nautical theme made me feel as if I could smell a stiff ocean breeze filling canvas sails. Not only did they do a bang-up job protecting the tables against water rings, but they also showed off our cheap bar glasses to their best advantage. "What can I get you?" I asked the stranger tucked next to the men's room door. Without looking up at the smile I was offering, he responded, "Vodka, neat, please." He then fiddled with the coaster until it was perfectly straight, square to the table's edge. Right off the hop, I tried to guess why this guy wouldn't look me in the eye. Painfully shy, culturally divergent, simply rude, or something to hide. Call me an idiot, because what did it matter? But there was an urgent need for me to know. I didn't for 1 second consider what I would do with the information once I had it. Did I want to teach him some manners or offer comfort for whatever had driven him to a guarded life? A few minutes earlier, as I wrestled with the leaf spanner, I'd been focused on the end of my shift and walking home to a nice bathtub soak with the stack of front cover removed crafting magazines I'd lucked into earlier that week in the back alley behind the drugstore. But that instantly changed. I felt an inexplicable need to grab the attention of the man who walked into a bar. I forgot about my sore calf muscles and platform heel pinch toes and decided to make the most of the stranger's presence. And that's Ina. And I'll move on to Blisse into her second chapter. This chapter is called Spoon Croon, and she's younger in this chapter. Although I have blips of early memory concerning the spoons, my first prolonged vivid recollection is attached to a particular day. I am 6 years old. Ina is allowing me to ride my bicycle independently up and down a short section of our quiet back alley. My outings behind our house make me anxious. The rear edges of people's properties are often the most neglected, sprouting reminders of the world's fragility. Tufts of weeds, the glitter of broken glass, amputated pieces of furniture. Our back lane, although not quite sinister, has a claustrophobic air to it. It is a Saturday in April. My fingers chilly on the handlebars of my bike, leaf buds peeking out from the branches of the neighborhood's trees, not quite ready to burst into that verdant hue that borders on neon. I ignore my back lane misgivings when I spy the wooden box on a pile of discarded items, including a steam iron and some yellowed kitchen curtains a few houses down. I brake well before the heat, knowing that although Ina shops regularly at the local thrift store, she would not approve of me picking up other people's cast-offs. I recognize that the dark wooden chest is for holding silverware. I saw others like it at a store downtown when Ina took me to help browse for gift ideas in the off chance her recently engaged cousin Charlene got around to setting a wedding date. During that excursion, Ina informed me that a whole box of silverware is called a canteen. I thought a canteen was just the cubby in my school where the bigger kids bought chocolate milk and erasers. As I sit on my bike in the alley, a lot of thoughts fill my head at once. Cousin Charlene lives in the city of Thunder Bay, and we shop at Hudson's Bay, but I have never seen an actual bay. Ina says maybe I will see Thunder Bay if we can ever afford to take a holiday. I know in my heart that would be special because I would see both a bay and the original Spoons city. In the meantime, there is a wooden box, just like the one at the bay, right in our alley. My spotting it suggests a profound symmetry to me, like life is not just willy-nilly, that everything in the world happens for a reason, because that cast-off box would be perfect to house my spoons. The idea makes my heart thump as if I have just uncovered a treasure chest on a tropical island. There are 7 spoons now. I recently made them into a family, and I imagine them living in the wooden enclosure. Daddy spoon, mommy spoon, daughter spoon, son spoon, baby spoon, granny spoon, and pet spoon. A family quite distinct from my own, which consists of Ina and me. Before I christened them, the spoons served other numerous purposes. I practiced my first counting skills with them, ate my cereal with the one that has a U bend in the handle, the one I call daughter spoon. The spoons made great bubble scoops when Ina saw fit to add a drop of dish soap to my bathwater. They also served as excellent noisemakers, and I loved licking the bowl of the one with the simplest right-angle band, sun spoon, and sticking it to my nose, transforming myself into a Seuss-esque caricature. The box beckons. I inch my bicycle closer and recognize the hurdles to acquiring it. First off, the thought of garbage picking makes me feel ashamed. Secondly, I know my plastic basket is not large enough for the box's heft, and my training wheels have only been off for a month. I do not trust my balance. If I simply grab the box and run home, it will mean abandoning my bicycle and bad borders on felonious. My bike was cheaply purchased at a police auction the previous spring, a day when I caught a rare glimpse of Ina flirting. The officer on the receiving end of her attention had kneeled down and reminded me to take care of my new purchase and lock it up if I ever left it unattended. When he stood again, Ina concurred, batting her eyelashes at him. An awkward and unsettling moment for me, but one which I intuitively understood. His ship-shape conformist grooming and the factory-fresh authoritative squeak of his leather gun holster demanded a response that was outside the norm. Much to my distress, Ina's submissive regard appeared to evaporate shortly afterward, as she never bothered to acquire the promised bicycle lock, mostly because she spent the next week transforming our porch into a monument of national pride for upcoming Canada Day, scooping up every free or ultra-cheap miniature maple leaf flag product available. My bike security was shuffled down the list of priorities. But on that evening after the auction, she did inform me it was time I stop referring to her as Mummy and call her Ina instead. I would be going to kindergarten, she reminded me, and that was an indication that I had earned the right to be a big girl and call her by her given name. When I protested that even older children called their mothers Mummy, she responded, "Yes, Bliss, but you're pretty darn special. I've told you that since you were born, and so you don't always have to do what other kids do." It is possible I may have created Spoon Family to ensure there would still be a mummy in our home. And that's Bliss.
We want to move these ourselves.
Let me serve you.
Thank you. Well, thanks for reading, Patti. It was great to hear that out loud after reading it so much, together with you. As I mentioned, I was the editor on this project, and something that really interested me in this story as we worked through it was the way that this story explores truth and perspective. You might have caught a bit of that at the beginning of Ina's chapter there. In the book, each chapter alternates POV between Ina and Bliss as they together tell different sides of one intergenerational story. Through this telling, the characters demonstrate how fiction can be twisted around into truth and vice versa, and how we can twist ourselves up, trying to explain and understand our own truths and fictions. The book raises questions like, how do we use fiction to construct our true realities, and how do we use fiction to try to control our own truths and the realities of others? So, Patti, I'm curious about your process of writing into these questions and what you're hoping the Twistical Nature of Spoons has to say about the nature of fiction and truth.
Yeah, well, thanks for the question, Sarah. It's pretty complex. You would think it would be simple. On the surface, fiction and truth seem to be diametrically opposed opposites, and so it should be simple. But this book, as in life, sort of illustrates that it's not quite as straightforward as you might imagine. We tend to think of truth as an absolute. Truth is a thing we seek to understand, what we're doing here in the universe. And so you would think with that absolute concept that it would be pretty straightforward. But André Gide, who won the Nobel Prize for Literature, a French writer, said, believe those who seek the truth, doubt those who find it, which suggests to me that truth is actually pretty elusive in a sense. And then also, there's that concept of truth in fiction. Fiction writers tend to try to reveal truth. That's our jobs. And so I say to myself, well, how do we do that? And then what we do is we create a whole string of lies, and then we expect those lies to reveal truth, which is really twistical in and of itself to start with before we dig into the book. But the thing that came first with the book was the structure for me. I knew that I wanted to write a story, a single story that was being told from two different perspectives, as you mentioned, and that those perspectives were not going to align. And therein would bring some of the conflict into the novel. And Sarah actually, while we were going through the editorial process, indicated some spots to me where that could be heightened or enlarged and expanded upon. And I thank you very much for that, Sarah, for those insights. And the manuscript thanks you. So, however, even before the editorial process began, there was a moment in time when I began to really think about the main untruth of the book. And I can't identify that or describe the main untruth of the book to you, because if I do, then none of you will buy the book because it's all explained. So I'll refer to it as the main untruth. However, it was when I started to think about that and, the concept that why do people tell lies? Well, sometimes it's ignoble or malicious reasons, but oftentimes lies are generated from, someone avoiding hurting someone's feelings, and or perhaps they're covering up a shame of their own, or perhaps they're trying to protect another person. And when you think about those aspects of untruth or lies, you realize that, rather than perhaps feeling betrayal, that maybe there is some empathy required. Mm-hmm. And so those were sort of the aspects that were smashing up against each other and making for, a lot of thought and process. That's kind of how it came to be. And I realized also that that main untruth was going to drive the novel at that point, and it would come to the point where the book would be brought to its climax. And in this case, there are two climaxes, one for each character, if you will. And so, once again, this book is a bargain, people. It's a 2-for-1. So there you go. We always have to do one plug, and I'm done now. Oh, and your last question, what do I hope to say? Well, I'm not sure. I mean, you could sum it up in, there's two sides to every story. That would be very simple. I do hope, though, that if there's a ripple or an undercurrent here, that this book illustrates something, and that is that it's really meaningful work for all of us in this polarized society to try to see from other people's perspectives, I guess. So.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I realized that was a heavy-duty question right out the gate, and we're gonna move
to quicker,
slightly less. But that was something that I thought about a lot when reading this book, and what was so fascinating. But as you can tell from the readings too, these deep questions are explored, but in a very light tone, and very playful, and it's great. Something that I love about this book is all the magic. There are curses, and there are doves and spoons, and I was wondering why you're so drawn to magical realism, and what magical realism opens up for you in narrative.
Yes, it's interesting because this book, more than even my ghost story for younger readers, has more elements of magical realism than any of my other works. But as a child, I think I was a huge fan of fairy tales, and as a student of literature and drama in later years, I was always drawn to those stories or those works that asked me to suspend my disbelief. And so I think it was natural for me to progress into an area where magical realism was a focus. As well, the thing about magical realism is that the challenge of it is to ensure that the magical elements actually are promoting the reality rather than trying to get you to escape reality like true fantasy does. So it's a little bit different in that it still combines those elements. But with that challenge comes a tremendous freedom, because you know, you can write about these otherworldly things and things that might not be possible, but yet they are, and they're normalized, and so it's very freeing that way. I love that. My favorite part of writing is stretching my imagination, so those elements really lend to it. I'd like to do a little side blurb here too. There's something that happened to me as a writer when I was working on one of the scenes in this book, which has never happened before. Normally, when I write, it's banging my head against the wall for hour after hour. But when I was writing one of the scenes in this book, it's actually Blisse's birth scene, and something happened. I was well, first of all, I had to do a lot of research on the magical elements that appear in that scene. And then I had a very specific job for that scene, and that was to convince Ina, the mother, that this process of labor and delivery was really otherworldly, something otherworldly was afoot. And so I had this strict parameter, but when I sat down to write it, the magical elements just sort of transported me. And even when I read that scene back now, I feel like I traveled somewhere. And I don't want to describe it any further because my kids are in the front row and they might really worry about me. But I'll stop there.
Well, okay, I'd like to talk about the love stories in the book. There are two main love stories, one with Ina and the man from the bar, and spoiler, and then Blisse also meets someone when she's at university. And both of these romances are really sort of over the top, otherworldly, like sweeping romances. And I guess I was wondering if the book is being a little critical of that kind of sort of love at first sight narrative, or if it wholeheartedly, believes in the magic of that kind of love.
Right. Well, so sometimes I think that love at first sight and sweeping romance have gone the way of table doilies. We have dating apps now, right? We have dating apps, and they're analytical, and they're all of those other realistic type things that seem to preclude sweeping romance. But I definitely am from the table doily era, and so I presented the possibility of love at first sight and sweeping romance, although there is disillusionment around every single corner of this book. So I'm not trying to dodge the question. I don't know if I know the answer, but I really feel this is a question for the reader, in that I think everyone's sensibilities will perhaps have a different reaction to it. And I'm extremely eager to know what those reactions might be. So I welcome that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thinking about disillusionment, something that I also love about the book is that you get to see the characters grow and change. You hear Blisse as a really young child and all the way up until when she's a young adult, and Ina from a young adult into a mother and on. And I love those early Blisse scenes when she is so ready to believe in magic, and she is kind of looking for secrets in her life and magic and wanting to believe in it. But then, the voices do change as disillusionment enters the picture. And I was wondering about your process of not only having to switch between two voices in order to write the book, but also to then let those characters grow and as their contexts change and as their diction changes even.
Yes, well, it wasn't until I actually finished writing the book that an interesting thing happened. It was already at the printers when I sat down and thought about what it was when I sat down to write each of the characters. And I realized that when I sat down next to Ina, for example, it was like sitting down to with next to my best friend or confidant, and I wanted to hear her stories. I wanted to feel her pain and her, you know, all of the things that were going on in her life, just like she was my best friend. But when I went to write the Blisse scenes, and I wasn't aware of it at the time, but it was like Blisse was coming right through me. I was her conduit to the page, and she was just going to have her way, and that was all there was to it. So I had a very different experience writing the two characters, but I didn't realize it at the time. But with respect to them growing and changing, they definitely, both characters move from a state of innocence to experience. With Blisse, it's from childhood to being 18, but also with Ina, it's, you know, she's going from a state where she's a pretty carefree young woman, and then she's suddenly brought through the book to the responsibilities of motherhood and all those things that come about. And so really what I think, every time I sat down to write, I tried to remember what it was like to be in that place at that time. So when you're 6, the world is a very different place than when you're 18. So I tried to put myself back in each one of those places, and also imagine it, but also apply the very unique circumstances that these two are dealing with on top of it. Well, how would they cope, and how, you know, how from each of the perspectives of where they are in the book.
I'm also wondering if you can talk a little bit about the process of, it's a complicated thing that you're doing, where you're stringing together this narrative through 2 different alternating chapters. Did you write an Ina chapter and then a Blisse chapter and then Ina and Blisse, or did you go all the way through in one voice, all the way through in the other?
Yeah, I did alternate, but there was at one point when I had taken a bit of a break, as I did. This book took a very long time to write, and I was pretty sure that when I went back to the desk after months, that I was starting at the point of one character, and then I realized, oh my goodness, I just wrote the wrong chapter. And so then I realized, oh, well, that's easy enough. Just write another one in between. And it's the wonder of being a fiction writer. You can just do whatever you want. But then, of course, then you can run into trouble as well. So yeah, but I did write them alternately.
So the book is largely set in Winnipeg. Winnipeg is famous for being this sort of site of potent spiritual, magical energy, the confluence of the rivers, center of the continent. And I was wondering about your process of, first of all, why you chose to set this story in Winnipeg, but also the research process of how you depicted the city in sort of specific timestamps.
Right. Well, interestingly, the aspects of location and setting and place are the absolute least researched parts of the novel. There was a lot of research, but not on that. My research was recollection. So if there are things that are wrong in the book, it's because of faulty memory, or I had to make it up to fit the narrative. Winnipeg is, yeah, it's a magical place to start with. But when I came here, I was a student, a university student, and I was a lodger in a house, and the house had a foyer, and that foyer is actually the foyer that Ina and Blisse inhabit in the book. So it's pretty much exactly the same. Ina does not resemble my landlady from the time, but I just added in the fictional elements. There's, Blisse's bookshelf, and there is Ina's seasonal decorating going on, but the foyer was the foyer I lived in. I gave birth at the Misericordia, where Blisse is born. But our experiences were quite different. I mentioned that birthing scene. They weren't at all similar. So if you read the book, no. there was a restaurant that Blisse goes to with friends, and those were real restaurants in Winnipeg, but sadly they are no more. Be fun to know if anybody recognizes them just from the minor descriptions. But there was a little bit of research, you know, from a historical point of view. You talk about the, you know, the otherworldliness of Winnipeg as well. There is a magician in the book, Knowlton, and I think of that very incredible photograph of Houdini suspended in front of the Free Press building, doing his escape thing. That was actually 100 years ago. It was, I think, 1923. So it's kind of neat that there are those kinds of connections, but really Winnipeg is a personal part of my life. And I also had, my parents moved here, met and married, and although I was born in Ontario, Winnipeg already had like a mythological scope to it for me as a child because of their stories. And then I moved here for love, and there's nothing more magical or otherworldly or romantic than standing in Winnipeg's Old Market Square when the snow is falling down gently all around you and you're young and in love. And so, you know, well, yeah, but then until it gets to a foot or two deep, transit stops running. But there is no better fictional place in the world than Winnipeg in my view. So there it is.
I have one last question, then we'll open things up. So you can start already thinking about what you want to ask Patti. But my last question is, I'm interested in what drew you to this story, which I think at its heart is a story about mothers and daughters. And it shows the really special intimacy between mothers and daughters, and then also, you know, the very special kinds of conflicts that can occur when, you know, the daughter is reaching independence and growing up. And yeah, I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so the concept, you know, I'm a daughter and a mother, so there's that. I was writing a very different book. I'd written numerous chapters, a book about a love triangle, actually, that I subsequently abandoned and started to write this book. And although I wasn't aware of it at the time, and if you'd asked me at the time, I would have said, no relation at all, but my own mother passed away at about that time. And I don't know if my subconscious was asking me to explore that bond or not. My mother was larger than life in my life, and although she didn't read books or pursue artistic endeavor, she really encouraged me to write and to make sense of this messy world. And so perhaps I'm speculating that is why the change took place. And as well, you know, I'm also a mother. I'm blessed. I was well into motherhood at the time that I started working on this book. And I suppose if I had to sum up this book in one word, I would say that this book is about love. And so, yeah, I think that's where I'll end it.
It's a beautiful place to end. I think we can open things up now to audience questions.
Was twistical actually a word, or did you make it up?
Thank you for that. It is a word that appears in some dictionaries, but not all. But isn't it a great word? Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yes, it is a real word, although it's a little challenging to find it in some places.
I'm not sure if I completely understand what you're saying about the relationship between truth and fiction, but I do find it a very, very interesting thing to contemplate, which I haven't before. So I've been sitting here thinking about it, and perhaps as a way to extend the conversation, I'll just share really quickly my thought. And I don't know, but I want to believe that there are absolute truths, but we can't know them. But we keep searching for them. And fiction is just one of the ways in which we undertake that search. That's kind of, yeah. But anyways, thanks for bringing all that up, because I haven't, like, that's really interesting.
Well, Gerald, maybe you should come out and have my seat. Thank you. You described it better than I ever could. Thank you.
Hi, Patti. Are there any literary Easter eggs in this book, like there were in your last book, Autumn and Spring?
Oh, gee, that's a really good question. Anybody know the answer to that who's read the book? Literary Easter eggs. Can you elaborate for me? Yeah.
You did drop Shakespearean lines into your book.
Oh, okay. Okay. This book does focus on artistic endeavor a lot. So there is that. There's a lot of reference to Commedia dell'arte, which is theater with masks, improvisational theater from way back when. So there is a lot of that occurring in this novel, and I think one of my main objectives for writing this book was to look at artistic pursuit and what that entails, and how we strive for it, and how we achieve it, and how we sometimes don't even know what we're doing, and yet we come out the other side, and there it is. So in terms of that, there's quite a bit of reference to different aspects of historical theater and things like that. So thank you.
Okay, I do have a question coming in from one of our online watchers. Kristen Whitman says, I'm sorry I'm not able to be there in person tonight, but I do have a question for Patti. Did she ever fear that her characters would not be received as empathetic?
Well, hi, Kristen. Thank you for the question. Sorry you're not here. Yes, I suppose that's always a risk. Ina's really out there, and you can't ever be sure that some people could appreciate her for who she is and how she behaves. Yes, no spoiler alert, but she creates a lot of havoc. So would you say, yeah, it might be hard to love her, but yeah, I do. so but thanks, Kristen.
What's the biggest challenge in writing authentically, alternatively in two distinct voices?
Well, it does take some focus, and I know that at one point, way back when, I didn't, yeah, I didn't want Ina to appear like she was just sort of a flaky person. I guess that would be the best way to say it. And so I kind of wrote her down a little bit for a while, and then I did get a comment that no, the two characters are almost actually too close together now, and so you really have to work at that daily to put yourself there. And unfortunately, as I said, I had that experience where when I sat down to write one, it felt different than sitting down to write the other. So that was really beneficial for me. But there were little things that Blisse has a very different vocabulary. She doesn't speak like a 6-year-old. I worked on various aspects of that to ensure. And there are many times, even in the editorial process, where the question came up, would she say this? And those were really good questions for both my editors. And so, yeah, that whole process, you know, is really a journey. And you just try to, with both of my characters there, I just love them both, and they wouldn't let go of me, I wouldn't let go of them. So it made it a little bit more enjoyable to try to keep that flow of each of them being unique and apart.
Okay, it looks like we're done for questions. Just a moment. Just be right back.
I think we should have had puppets or something.
Okay, do you guys have any closing comments for the evening, or?
Well, I just want to once again just thank everyone so very, very much. You can't imagine how much I appreciate you all coming out tonight. And once again, thanks Sarah for so much of this journey. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. What a lovely evening. Okay, we'll move along with the signing portion of the evening. So again, we ask you to remain seated while we transport Patti safely over to her signing table. So copies of tonight's book will be available at the signing table and as well behind the cash registers. We are happy to have you pick up a copy and get it signed, but we do ask you to pay for it before you leave the store. We'd like to thank again Patti, Sarah, and Turnstone Press, and to all of you for your attention and questions. So please join me one more time in acknowledging Patti Grayson. Thank you.